introduce himself shortly, but first I just wanted to give you a little bit of an idea of what we'll be talking about tonight. So for many of us, including myself, we were never really taught about the process of home buying or the steps that you need to take in order to prepare yourself for it. So tonight we're going to go over the benefits of buying a home, the myths or questions that a lot of people have regarding the process. Hey, Alex. And then we will also talk about the agreement of sale and what parts you should familiarize yourselves with. And then finally, what it takes financially for you to buy a home. So, of course, we expect you guys to have questions throughout. We just ask that if you do have questions while John's speaking, you put it into the chat. And then if he has any time to answer those during the talk, he will. But of course, we will have plenty of time afterwards to answer those questions as well. And then lastly, after the webinar, I'll be sending you an email again. That will be a little zip form with some different documents attached to it, and they will be some key paperwork for you to kind of familiarize yourself with when you are ready to buy a home. So that will be including the agreement of sale, which we'll shortly go over tonight, a lead and radon disclosure form. This is something that a seller will fill out for you and the home you're looking to buy, a consumer information statement form. So this goes over explaining all about agency, the different types of agency, and which ones you can sign on to with your agent. And then lastly, I have a little millennial guide to ownership that you guys can read. It will pretty much summarize a lot of what we'll talk about tonight, but it'll have some more statistics on why a lot of millennials are delaying the process and why they should be more interested in home buying. So I'm going to pass it over to John, who's going to introduce himself. We're going to call it the What Gives You the Right to talk about this. And John's going to explain everything about his career and why he'll be chatting with us tonight.
Great. Thanks, Amanda. And welcome, everybody. So want to just go through a couple things within the PowerPoint, but mainly this is 10 hours worth of information that we're going to put into however long you need, 45 minutes or so, but we won't give you 10 hours worth tonight. Really going to just give you a general outline. It can be intimidating, and that's really what my goal is here tonight, is to not make it intimidating for you to understand that it is a process and you go through each step one at a time. And that if it truly is your desire, Amanda can help you get there. And we've done this for thousands of people. And if you're truly interested, we will do this for you and help you buy your first home. So I am the owner of Remax Associates, what's called the broker of record as well. And I'm not going to go through the 30 some plus years of experience that I have. Just I'm going to trust that you're on this call thinking that maybe I can teach you a few things tonight, and that's all we really need to do is just look at that, understand that there are a lot of things that are going to be unique for each one of you. You're welcome to ask those questions along the way, or wait till it's over. Or if it's a question that you're not comfortable asking in front of everyone else, then just get a hold of Amanda and she'll get you the answer. So for the beginning of this, why buy a home? I think that's a great question, and Amanda touched on it. You know, for young people today trying to buy a home, it's not necessarily close to your job like it used to be. Right? It used to be people would say, okay, I'm going to work for this company for the next 30 or 40 years. And so I'm going to buy a house in this neighborhood. And then when the family grows, we're going to move to this neighborhood. And then that's how life is going to be. And life has changed. It's not that way. So you need to first want to buy a home and understand that home ownership does have some responsibilities, but it also has some great benefits. It's how you build wealth in America. You still have tax advantages. But I think more than anything, it's your own. And if you've not rented yet and you're going to experience that first, you will probably have some moments in renting where you're wishing that it was yours and you could make the decision. Even if that decision comes along with an expense to fix some plumbing or pay for the paint or whatever it is, it still is something that is your own. So I think that's really what it comes down to for everyone. Do they want something that is their own, or do they want to rent something that is owned by someone else? Okay, it is easier than you think. It is a daunting process, and there's a lot to it. But buying a home in the United States of America is pretty darn easy when it comes to the financing part of it. You can have, there are many programs out there where you can have very little money down. So it doesn't take 20% of the down payment plus a whole bunch of closing costs. Now, in today's market, it's pretty fast for a seller. And so you're most likely going to pay something close to full price, if not full price or above. But there are still many programs that will allow you to buy a home with very little total money needed. There are some grant programs and other things like that that we'll touch on. We're going to go over the agreement of sale, and we're going to talk about getting you financing. So again, I'm not going to dwell on this. There's a little quick hit on me. Just believe that I do know what I'm talking about, and I'm here to help. Okay, so we've talked about, this is a great quote that Joanna added for us by Susie Orman. Owning a home is the keystone of wealth, with financial affluence and emotional security. I think those are some of the things that we just talked about, right? The emotional security part, I think, is really big. Financial affluence, how much is your home going to be worth in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? Well, it is most likely going to go up. Now, all markets are just that. They have their ups and downs. But real estate does tend to be a steady increase. We had a really bad experience in the Great Recession. Let's hope that we don't experience that anytime soon. And property values do tend to hold that value and appreciate. But this is for the long run. Please don't think that you heard somebody bought a home and the next year made $50,000 by selling it, and that's why you want to buy a home. That's not a reason. If you fall into that situation, that's great, and I hope we're part of that for you, but don't count on that. Okay, so I do want to open it up here. I know we talked about typing things into the chat, but this will help me a little bit. Just what's on your mind? Why are you here? What are your questions and challenges? If anybody cares to share that.
I'll go. So I'm here because I've been renting now. Well, I started renting in college, but post college, I've rented for 3 years now. And I can see in the next, I don't know, year to 3 years looking into home buying. I'm not really sure when because the world is crazy right now. But I figure, why not learn more now so that when the time comes and it feels right, that I have the tools, because I've learned a little bit from my bank about getting like pre-approved for financing and things like that. But I've spoken to a number of my friends who recently got married, and they pursued their own first home, and they had quite a lot of challenges, especially in this pandemic environment with getting inspectors and all that kind of stuff. So it just seems like there's a lot of moving pieces, and I thought this would kind of simplify all of that just to learn a little bit more.
Great, great. Thanks for sharing that, Alex. Yeah, we will cover the majority of that here tonight. Anybody else have anything that they think is not something we're going to cover, or any specific questions? Okay, well then I'm going to keep on scrolling, and we're going to hopefully smoothly jump over to the agreement of sale. This is when we're supposed to have that fill music again. But we've got an agreement of sale now, don't we? Right, so okay, so this is for the Delaware. This is the Delaware agreement of sale. So again, it's going to be specific to the state. A lot of these things, though, are going to be general topics that will also take place in Maryland and Pennsylvania. By the way, we're a brokerage that does serve Delaware, Maryland, and Pennsylvania. Tonight specifically, I'm going to talk about Delaware, but a lot of the things will exist. Certain breaks, certain mortgage programs will exist in all of those states. So this is a 9-page document that grows and changes every single year, which is why you really do need a real estate professional to guide you through this. And what I don't want to accomplish here tonight is that we skim through this. You leave here tonight thinking, wow, that's a whole lot of stuff. That scared me off. Just please don't let that happen. This is legalese where we fill in the blanks and we walk you through the steps. This is the part that takes care of you, that protects you. This is an agreement of sale. And when you sign this, it's binding to all parties. So you do have to abide by the terms, but so does the seller, and it spells everything out ahead of time. Now, with that said, we commonly say that this should be used with gray ink because there's very little black and white about an agreement of sale. So what do I mean by that? Well, it's going to talk about things like defects. And even though it defines a defect, when you have an inspection, everyone can interpret that just a little differently. As is a big statement today that a seller likes to make. I want to sell my house as is. We'll talk about that here tonight because what does as is mean? We've got however many people, 11 people on the call. We've got 11 different opinions of what as is means. Okay, so but let's take this slowly here, one little section at a time. Section 1 is real easy. It's the parties. So the buyer's name and the seller's name and their addresses. Then it lists the property, the legal address of the property, including a tax parcel number. 3 is the cool part. That's what you're willing to offer to pay for a property. And again, in today's market, in Newcastle County, Delaware, houses are selling for almost 100% of their asking price. So because that's an average, that means that several homes are selling for over their asking price currently. So it is very much a seller's market. So you put in your purchase price, and then you get to give a good faith deposit when you write an offer. And once that offer is fully executed, which means it's been accepted by everyone, then that check is deposited by the company that holds the escrow. That's your good faith that you're going to move forward. The contract states many times that there are clauses in the agreement that if the agreement is declared null and void, essentially through no fault of the buyer, then that money is returned to the buyer. Okay, but you still put up a good faith deposit. How much is that? Well, that's negotiable. Just like your offer, your good faith deposit will be negotiable. And I would say that many first-time home buyers have a good faith deposit of between $1,000 and $2,000. Again, that is your money that if you're going to settlement is brought to settlement on your behalf, and it's used as part of your down payment and closing costs. Inclusions and exclusions. So what are you going to get? You're going to get all of the things that are checked here in these boxes that the parties agree to. Again, they're negotiable. So the seller will tell you what they're hoping they will take with them and what they're willing to leave. You can agree to that, or you can ask for other things to be included. The things that are always included are essentially the fixtures. If it's bolted in, nailed in, screwed in, it stays with the property. But things like drapes, refrigerator, washer, dryer, those are the common negotiable inclusions and exclusions. If there are any funky inclusions or exclusions, then they can be listed there too as something that is not common. What if the property is subject to a lease? We could spend a couple hours going over this. I'm going to give you the 60-second version of it. If you are looking at a property that is subject to a lease, then that means there is a tenant there, there's a lease in place, and you really, if you're going to buy the home to live in it, you want it to be free of all leases and for the tenant to not occupy the property. So if there is a property that's being rented, that they've been given notice, they're going to be moving out, then Amanda would help you to write something in the agreement of sale that clarifies that and states that the property would be free of any leases at the time of settlement. You don't want to buy a home, have a holdover tenant there that's disgruntled, and all of a sudden your first day as a new homeowner is as a landlord. Okay, that's the last thing that we want to do. So hopefully there's no lease in place to begin with, and most times it's not. But when you're buying your first home, sometimes they are rental properties that the owner says, I don't want to rent anymore, and let's sell it. So there is a chance that you would have that. Just make sure that you're protected. 5B, what if there is a third party lease? Well, what could that be? The two most common ones in our area would be a security system and a propane tank. They're typically leased. The security system is real easy. That can just be discontinued. And if you want to get a new security provider, then you can do that. The system can just stay there. But you do want to make sure that you're not taking over any payments for that security system. The propane tank is a little different. Most propane suppliers they own the tank and you don't, and you're leasing that tank. And part of the terms of leasing that tank is you have to buy the propane from them. And so they basically give you the tank in exchange for you leasing or buying the propane from them. So if you stop buying the propane from them, then they come and take the tank. So you need to know exactly what the terms are of that lease agreement with the propane tank. And there are propane tanks that are going to exist in properties, even if they don't use that as the main heating source. They could use it just to heat water. They could use it for a grill somewhere, for lots of other things. So you can't just check and see if it is the main heating source. You need to know if there is a third-party lease for propane. So how do you know that? Well, what we're not really going to get into tonight is something called the seller's disclosure. I believe Amanda may be sending you a blank one of those so that you can see what it is. But that is also a multi-page document that is the seller's understanding of the condition of the property. And it's very thorough in Delaware. So they will disclose whether there is a third-party lease, they will disclose whether there is a propane tank, and they will disclose who the provider of the propane is. The financing contingency. So let's do this. Let's skip right past that one since we're going to talk about finance, and we'll bring that back for the end of this. Everybody awake still? Okay. So that's settlement. So when do you own the home? You get to own the home when you exchange money for keys and the deed is signed. The deed is the legal document that transfers ownership to you. So that is done on the day of settlement, at the time of settlement. You come in, you sign a whole bunch of papers, you sign your life away for a mortgage and all of those things that are going to scare you, but don't let them scare you. There's too many benefits to that for you to be scared. And then everyone signs that paperwork that transfers things over to you. The seller signs the deed transferring the property to you, and you become a homeowner. So settlement in Delaware is on the day agreed upon. But if we have a few challenges, then we do all agree that we'll extend that date out a reasonable period of time. So if you hear what I'm saying and understanding that things can be a little gray, they're not always just specific dates. There are some dates in here where it's called time is of the essence, and there are very specific dates. But the day of settlement can be delayed if there are certain things that happen out of the control of the buyer and seller. Okay, and those are too numerous to mention. Understand that most of the settlements happen on the day that they're supposed to happen, if everybody does what they're supposed to do. But in the event certain things crop up that were out of the control of the parties, they all agree to extend for a reasonable period of time. Okay? So then time
Can I
is
ask a quick question?
yes, sure.
Absolutely. So just to get a reference, I know obviously getting to the day of actual settlement, there's no specific day, but just on average, from the time that you might start looking for a house, what is the average time to reach that actual settlement day? So, for example, let's say someone's in a situation where they're renting and their
Mhm.
lease is up pretty soon and they want to get out of the house, but they need to go find a new home. Okay, well, for all I know, it could take 6 months or it could take a month or like so. Just I don't know. I guess back to the question: what is the average time it takes to actually get to settlement, so someone could plan for the future?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we're gonna let's talk about that from the start of the process, and then we'll talk about it from the start of an executed agreement of sale. So from the start of the process, it's going to be different for everyone. There are going to be some things again that are out of your control, and one of those things right now is the inventory and supply of homes that you could buy. And so the challenge for a home buyer right now is that there are more people looking at the same house than there have been in a long, long time. So that's what causes prices to climb. That's what causes multiple offers, and that's what causes frustration with the buyer with finding the right house. Again, all the reasons that you need a real estate professional to help you through this, because we do have access to homes not only when they first come on the market, but even homes before they've ever gone on the market, or homes that the seller wants to sell, but they're not publicly allowing people through. So there are lots of different ways that a real estate professional can help you to find the home. What's the average time to search for a home? Again, that's going to be, that's going to depend on each person's wants and needs. But I would say that 4 weeks is probably a decent average time frame right now. You could find something on day one or on week one, but if you're really looking for something that's specific, or if unfortunately you're finding something and so are three other people and your offer does not get accepted, then you would have to move on to the next property and the next property. So let's say that it takes about a month to find a home. Well, then you find that home and you have a fully executed agreement of sale. The way human nature is, everyone wants things to happen quickly because of the market, and they think writing an offer that settles quickly is what the seller may want, and they probably do. But a byproduct of the market that we're in is that everyone's schedule is now backed up and delayed. And who's everyone that I'm talking about? Home inspectors, appraisers, attorneys getting title work done. So what's title work? That's the attorney making sure that all the liens are taken care of. And they have to get somebody to research all of that. So all of those things take anywhere from 45 to 60 days to complete comfortably. And I see a lot of people trying to rush to get to settlement within 30 days. That's okay to push the system as long as all the parties understand that there is the high likelihood that they're not going to make it within 30 days and that they're going to be okay to extend. So let's go back here. About 4 weeks or so, depending on your circumstances, I would say is the average time to find a home. Let's add 2 more months onto that to get to settlement. Go through your inspections, have the appraisal done, have the attorney order the title work, do all of those things. So you're probably looking at start to finish at 3 months. And the fastest you could do it would probably be 2 months from start to finish, from looking at houses to settlement day. Now, does it take some people 6 months? It does, because it takes them that long to find a home. So the big variable there is how long is it going to take you to find a home? And that's each person's individual situation. Now, you do put a date in there and everyone tries to make it. But the reason that settlement date does not fall under time is of the essence, and let me just address what time is of the essence it means. That means that all of the other dates in this agreement, such as when you apply for a mortgage, when your mortgage commitment is due, when your home inspection results are due, when the seller has to reply, when all negotiations are supposed to be done, when all other inspections are supposed to be done, all of those dates fall under time is of the essence. And that means that if you don't meet those dates and those deadlines, that there could be consequences. For example, if you don't apply for your mortgage within the time frame and you're caught not doing that, then that is a breach of the agreement. If you don't meet your mortgage commitment date by the time frame specified, the seller may void the agreement of sale. If you don't meet your inspection dates to request repairs, then you could be told that you've waived your right to request them because you missed the date. So all of these other dates are very serious. The settlement date is just not so serious. And it should be, and it used to be. So why the heck did they want to put it in there that it's different than all the other dates? Well, it's because of those things that happen out of our control that they changed it to, let's make it a reasonable extension already written in. So let me give you some specific examples. Attorneys do survey work and title work towards the end of the closing. So when you buy a house and tell an attorney that you bought the house, they don't run out and get a survey done that next day. They wait for it to be closer to settlement because they're fronting money to a surveyor that they will then collect from you at the time of settlement. And so what if that survey shows a fence is on a neighbor's yard and it's not really your fence? Well, if that's the case, then depending on the neighbor, depending on the fence, depending on the distance, there could be a problem. And you need the time to work that out. And you don't know, because how long is it going to take to get a hold of a neighbor to have some agreement that they understand that the fence is there, they're not going to ask you to move it, or to tell the owner that they have to move the fence because the seller didn't know, or the neighbor didn't know rather, and now the neighbor's upset and wants the fence back. All of these things, you're just packing boxes and getting ready to move into your home. And then you find this out. So that's why those things now state that time is not of the essence for settlement, because we don't want any of those last minute things to just ruin all of the dreams and all of the hard work leading up to it. And the other part is, if everyone wants to move forward, they're going to run around and get an addendum signed anyway to extend everything. So why not put in an automatic extension? So that's why the settlement date is written the way it is as far as the deadline. But just as important, that's why the other things do fall under time is of the essence. Okay, did that help?
Yeah, absolutely. Extensive and very informative. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure thing. You're very welcome.
John, can you talk a little bit about how you would plan for breaking a lease?
So I'm going to talk again about specific to Delaware. The landlord-tenant code in Delaware requires a 60-day notice to terminate a lease if it is either towards reaching its end or if it's going month to month. So what I mean by that is, if you have 6 months left on your lease, you can't just say, okay, I'm giving you 60-day notice and I'm terminating this lease. If you have 6 months left on your lease and you truly want to start the buying process now, the best thing to do is just to be very transparent with your landlord and say, would you be willing to work with me and let me out of my lease if I find a home? And if they say no, then you're bound by that agreement. That lease is a legally binding agreement. In terminating a lease, it's the 60-day notice that I mentioned. So the way 60-day notice works, and I want this to be simple for you to understand, is it goes to the beginning of the next month after you say, I'm giving you notice. So today is December 15th. If your lease is running month to month in Delaware, You give your landlord notice today or anytime up to December 31st. It doesn't matter which day, any of those days. And that notice is effective January 1st, and it's a 60-day notice. So therefore, your lease would expire the end of February. If your lease is, let's say your lease right now would expire anyway, the end of February, the parties still have to give each other notice this month for it to terminate the end of February, or it rolls over into a month-to-month lease. And what's confusing about the term month-to-month is it's really 2 months to 2 months, because there's a 60-day notice that's required. Okay? So if you're in a lease situation, the best thing to do there is get a copy of it to Amanda so she can review it with you and go over what your choices are in terminating that lease. Okay? If you are terminating your lease, and let's say let's stick with this example. Let's say it's the end of February and you find a house and you want to buy it in the end of January, which would be really too fast right now. Okay, but I'm doing this as an example. Let's say you settled at the end of January. Your first mortgage payment is not due until March 1st. Okay, so keep that in mind. You pay rent in advance on the first of the month. You pay a mortgage, you pay that mortgage payment in arrears. So you use that money and then you pay for it. So if you settle, you pick a month, you settle the end of April, your first payment is due June 1. Okay, so you do have that 30-day gap there of payment that's due for housing that you can use to your benefit. Some people like to do that so that they can move from an apartment into a home, and it gives them 30 days. They're still making some sort of housing payment every month. But if you settled on the day, if you settled 30 days before your lease expired, it would give you 30 days to paint, change things, move in if you want to, right? Otherwise, if you settle on the same day that you have to move out and you're moving in, then you have to do all of those things at the same time. It's all your own personal choice. You would get the benefit if you pushed it all into one day of not having a housing payment for an entire month. And maybe that's the best thing for you. Okay. Anybody have any questions about that? That can be the 60-day notice, and the whole skipping a month thing can be kind of confusing. You need me to repeat it? You're good? Okay. All right, transfer tax. So the state of Delaware has the largest transfer tax in our country. It's 4%, and it's split equally by buyer and seller. So that means that a buyer has to pay 2% of the purchase price to the government. But hang on, there's good news. If you are buying in an unincorporated area, so I'm going to use Newcastle County, if you guys don't mind, as an example. The city of Newark is an incorporated area, okay? The town of Ellesmere, Newport, those places are going to be their own little towns or cities. You don't get a break in transfer tax there, but you do get a break if you're buying in the county limits, okay, which is the majority of Newcastle County. And it is quite a good range of housing selection. The state of Delaware also gives you a break if you are a first-time home buyer. So if you're buying in Newcastle County that's not within a municipality, you get the state break and the county break That reduces your transfer tax from 2% down to 0.75%. Okay, major savings for you there. So again, Amanda will walk you through what your closing costs are when you get to the point of getting a pre-approval and looking at what we call the total acquisition costs, which is your down payment and your closing costs. But saving 1.25% on whatever your purchase price is significant. Okay. The very worst you're going to do is 0.5% that the state gives you. Okay. So the most you'll pay is 1.5. The least you'll pay is 0.75%. That's a one-time fee. I mean, I bash our state about the transfer tax and it being the largest in the country, but we don't have a sales tax. We have relatively low property taxes. So there are trade-offs for that. But the state and local governments make a lot of money off transfer tax, but they also do look out for first-time home buyers. You get a significant break that is a one-time cost when you purchase, and it's an additional cost when you sell. Okay, so when I say one time, it's not a tax that you pay ongoing while you live there. It's a tax that you pay when you transfer real estate, either a buyer or a seller. All right, questions?
John, and that transfer tax is in any state, correct? It's nationwide. It's not just Delaware.
Yeah, now there are some states, Amanda, that have zero transfer tax, but they're not around here. And there are going to be transfer taxes, but they're going to be relatively low. Like Maryland is going to be, Maryland does it in a different capacity, but to give an average for Maryland, it's probably about 1% total. So yeah, you're going to have transfer tax. They just, sometimes they call it different things in different states, but it's all the same. It's a conveyance transfer tax based on the sale price of the property. Okay, so title. Title is what the attorney does. The attorney checks to make sure that everything is paid up the right way with the property. They also check and make sure that the property has transferred along the way. And when it's been transferred, were all of those previous mortgages and liens, were they all paid off properly? So let's use an example of a property's been sold 4 times and you're going to be the 5th owner. Well, 3 times ago, maybe a mortgage was paid off, but it was never satisfied. In other words, no one took proof down to the court to say, hey, this obligation that liens against this property was not legally taken care of. And a couple people missed it along the way. And then this come to the rescue attorney that you hired found it. Well, then it needs to be taken care of. And they're versed in taking care of those things. Do they happen often? No, but can they happen? Yes. And that's why you have Delaware as an attorney state. So in Delaware, you're going to hire a lawyer to do settlement. In Maryland and Pennsylvania, you can hire a title company or a lawyer to handle settlement for you. So their job is to make sure that that title is free and clear, that any liens that are against the property, the current mortgage, current water bill, property taxes, all of those things are taken care of and paid, and everybody knows that they've been paid. And you get a fresh start with your mortgage on the property. Okay. Fair housing, it lists the protected classes both nationally and in the state of Delaware. We don't discriminate by any means. I'm going to skip through some of these, not because they're not important, but just because the main things that I want to go over right now are the inspections, and we're going to go back to finance. So condition of the property and inspections. Unless you're buying a new home, you're not buying a new home. And it's going to have some things wrong with it, right? It's going to have some wear and tear depending on how old it is and how often things have been updated. But you're going to get a seller's disclosure that's going to say, hey, I'm the seller of the property, and this is when we fixed the roof or replaced the roof, and here are the other things that happened. And here's all my understanding of what the property is about. But in addition to that, you can hire, and we insist that you do, a home inspector to come out and look at the home. Now, a home inspector is going to be a generalist. Okay, so you go to your family doctor who gives you a checkup. And if there's something specific that's wrong with you, your family doctor says, go to that specialist. Okay, I don't like your earlobe, it doesn't look right, go to the earlobe specialist. Well, that's what happens here with property inspections. The home inspector will say, hey, I don't like this heater. I think there's something wrong with it. Get the heater people to come out and look at it. Okay, now they may be able to determine that there is a defect, or they may say it's beyond the scope of what I do. So what's the benefit of hiring a home inspector? Well, you need that generalist to tell you these things, to point out things that you may need to further investigate. And then the other benefit of that is they do tell you, at least the good ones do, general maintenance to look out for. You know, this isn't just about, well, let's find out what's wrong with the property. Let's find out what you need to do to keep the property in good condition while you're living there. That'll save you thousands and thousands of dollars if you know what to do for the proper upkeep. Okay, so you have the right to have an inspection done. That is at your direction and your expense. And when you do that, in section 21 here, there are going to be dates that you have to meet. So what are the common times? You'll see that it says that if no date is in there, that 15 days is what we agree to. And that's about right. By the time you call a home inspection company, get on their books, get them out to inspect the property, get a written home inspection report that is detailed, that defines a major defect, and review it with Amanda and write an addendum requesting repairs and send it over, you're 15 days in, right? Maybe 10 to 15 days in. So what is a major defect? Well, a major defect, according to this agreement of sale, is something that is not doing its job as originally intended or is operating in an unsafe manner. So if a roof is 17 years old and is reaching the end of its designed life, as home inspectors like to describe, but it does not leak, it's not a major defect. Okay, it's doing its job as originally intended. It's stopping water from coming in the top of the house. But if a window, you lift up a window and you let go and it slams down, it's not doing its job as originally intended. If the window has broken a seal and there's condensation in between the two panes, it's not doing its job as originally intended. If the concrete on the sidewalk has heaved up, that is something that's it's unsafe. Okay, it's not necessarily, you can say it's not doing its job as originally intended, but more than anything, it's unsafe. So those are the main things that you're looking for, something that is unsafe or that it's not doing the job it was originally intended to do. That defines a major defect. And so then you have the right to say to the seller, here's the list of all the major defects that I want you to fix. You can ask for them all, or you can ask for some of them. And depending on the situation and how you tend to negotiate things and what's important to you, then you ask for what you think you need to ask for. And we can advise you as we're going through that with each situation. The seller can then say, okay, I'll fix all these things. Then that part of it, that part of this agreement of sale is now removed, and the seller must have the work done by licensed contractors where necessary. There's another little gray line, but it does say where necessary or when necessary. And then they have to provide proof that they did that by sending you receipts 2 days before settlement. Okay? If the seller says, I'm not fixing anything, or you ask me to fix 7 things and I'll fix 6 of them, then you can accept what the seller says and agree to that. You can counter offer them back, or you can tell them that you're rejecting that and you don't want to buy the house any longer.
When you say, quick question, when you say counter offer to that, so if there's 7 defects and they go, okay, you know what, cool, I'll fix 5, but the other 2 are a little too pricey for me. I don't want to do that because that's going to take away from my next home I'm going to buy. You can then counter offer on the entire house itself.
Well, you don't typically. You typically counter offer on the addendum.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, could you get into, okay, if you'll fix these things for me, I'd be willing to pay more. You could, but most times you don't. You just counter offer the fact that you're asking.
They
them to
wouldn't
do
do
something.
it.
Yeah.
Okay. That may, okay.
Yeah.
But Giles, this is the protection that a lot of buyers don't realize that they have, both with the financing contingency and the home inspection contingency. Yes, the contract is binding, and once you're in it, like I said, it's binding, but these contingencies protect you. So like John said, you can counter offer it, you can agree to it, or you can reject it. So if the seller says, hey, I'll only fix 6 of the 7 that you want, but you're not willing to buy the house unless they fix all 7, you can say, great, I'm out of the agreement. And there's no penalty to you. And in that instance, you would get that earnest money that we talked about in the beginning, where you have to give maybe 1,000 or 2,000.
So the good standing?
Yeah, you're
The
good
money
standing.
good standing.
You
Okay.
get that back. Because in this contingency, you're pretty much saying, this is what I'd like to be done. If you're willing to do that, great. If not, then I have an out. You don't have to reject it. You can counter it, like John said, but it protects you from, if you're buying a house and you're signing this agreement and your financing doesn't come through, or an inspection comes in and the house has mold, like you're not stuck with that house, if that makes sense.
Okay. That does make sense. Thank you.
And that is correct. I do want to summarize it for everyone that the seller first has the right to fix it. And if they say no to any of it, then you're not forced to buy it. Okay, that's the simplest way to say it. So please don't think that you can enter into an agreement and then have an inspection done and say, I'm not even going to write an addendum. There's so much wrong here that I didn't see. I don't want to buy the property. You don't have that option. But you have the option of saying, here are defined major defects, fix them. And if they don't, then you can say, okay, I'm not going to buy. And if they come back and say, oh, we'll fix them, you can, if you've declared it null and void, you can move forward with a release from the agreement of sale. Okay, but I do see a very common, common behavior of buyers and buyers agents saying, yeah, they just don't want to buy the house anymore. Yeah, the inspection, they don't want to, that there's nothing in this agreement that allows the buyer just to say, I'm not going to buy the house anymore. Now, between a seller's disclosure and common sense, there's going to be a whole lot that you're going to see to begin with. So the inspection is there to catch these other things that you really, if you're not the expert, you would not have known. And also if the seller, the seller's telling you what they've experienced, but they don't necessarily know the condition of everything. When was the last time they were in their attic to see if, did they know that a vent fan went out the right way into the attic or to the outside of the house? Did that cause mold growth up in the attic? I mean, sellers don't always go out checking all these things. So that's why you have the right to do that. So it's not just a home inspection, but you have the right to inspect other things as well. So if the property has well water or a septic system, then you can have those inspections done. By the way, the approximate cost of a home inspection is about $500. And it is your expense and direction. So if you are saying, I want a home inspection and I'm going to pay for it, and then there are other things that show up that should be inspected as a result of the home inspection. So what could that be? Let's go back to the heater example. The home inspector says, this heater is 20 years old. I don't know the condition of the heat exchanger, which is a major component of a heater. Please have that evaluated by a licensed HVAC contractor. Well, then that's your option to direct someone to do that inspection and your expense, because it wasn't conclusive that there was a defect. So you have to prove that there was a defect, okay? All right, so then the other inspections, well water, there's swimming pool, but the other big one is radon. So radon is a gas that is made up of decomposing minerals in the earth, and it tends to sneak in through the basement and up through the house, and long-term exposure can cause cancer. So you can have a radon test done. It's at about $125 to $150 for that. And then it's the same thing. If it exceeds 4 picocuries per liter, then the EPA has deemed that to be an unsafe amount. You have the right to ask the seller to fix it. And if the seller says no, then you do not have to buy the property. If the seller says yes, then you're moving forward and buying the property. Fixing that means that they put in a mitigation system that on average costs between about $1,000 and $1,500 for a 1,500 to 3,000 square foot house. Okay, it tells you all the things. What happens if you default? Well, you can get whooped, right? You can get taken to court and you can get whooped. And if they whoop you hard enough, then you have to pay for the other side's attorney fees. Okay, so you just do the things that you're supposed to do in the contract. If everything goes through, then you're buying a home. That was the goal. And if things happen that cause this agreement to be declared null and void, then you're in the right. Hopefully the seller sees it that way. They release the money back to you, but they do have to sign off releasing the money back to you. But it does clearly state that the losing party, if you go to court, can be responsible for the winning party's attorney fees. Okay, now we handle 12 to 1,300 sales a year. Actually going to court for something like this, maybe 5 a year, if that. Most times things get resolved without going to court. And the ones that go to court are the $1,000 deposits that people just, want to go because they want to fight it out. The larger deposits tend to get worked out without going to court. Okay, agency. So what you want to find is either a designated agent or a dual agent. Those are your two choices, but I'm going to tell you why you shouldn't be too concerned about the difference between a designated agent and a dual agent. This is a conversation to have one-on-one with Amanda, because again, it's another 3-hour seminar to talk about agency. Amanda will work for you as a designated agent with any house that you are putting an offer in on and buying, and that will be her role. She will be the designated agent, the buyer's designated agent. If you are buying her listing, then she would be acting as a dual agent. So she at that point would be, with the consent of all parties, she would facilitate the sale and would not be able to hinder either party's ability to negotiate. So, and again, this could be a 3-hour seminar that I'm going to compress into 60 seconds for you. when a true real estate professional is doing their job and passing the information back and forth, there are times when that can make the transaction so much easier than seller to agent to buyer, from buyer to buyer's agent to seller's agent to seller. You can see how sometimes that information can get a little misunderstood. So look at it individually, understand that there are two different types of agency that you may experience. It's great if Amanda is your designated buyer's agent, and do not fear, but ask in detail how it works if it ends up being dual agency. Okay. Everybody good? Everybody awake? All right. The addendums, there's the seller's disclosure, which we talked about. If the property is old enough, there may be a lead-based paint disclosure form. The sellers have to disclose that they know that there is radon. There is a Kiowa resale certificate. That's if the homeowners association or condo association dues exceed a certain amount. There's a whole nother set of disclosures that need to come your way. You need to have a mortgage letter with credit check. That's your pre-approval, and that's going to be our segue into the last topic here tonight, which is finance. And then depending on the finance, you may have to have an FHA, a mandatory language addendum. You may, if you're a veteran, you would have the VA mandatory language. You have the right to ask for a warranty from the seller or buy one yourself. And then there can be additional addenda, and there can be additional terms. Okay, in the additional terms, the most common one would be if you're able to get settlement help from the seller. That's the seller contributing some of their proceeds towards your closing costs. In today's market, it's much less likely than it used to be. It could happen, but it's less likely to happen. Okay, so now we're going to go back up to finance. Aren't we? Here we go. So why should you care about the financing? And I mean that, like, I'm going to open it up for you guys. I know it sounds like such a simple question, but tell me why you might particularly care about the finance part of this. Giles.
Yeah, we're the one throwing money down.
Okay. It's your money.
Right.
Yeah. So what's it going to cost you long term, right? What's it going to cost you getting in for down payment and closing costs? Because they do vary. And what's it going to cost you over the long run?
And what does like
Okay.
a 30-year terms mean? A lot of people think they're locked in for 30 years.
Right. Right. Yeah. So what is this? And there's also a disclosure that the lender has to give you. And I mean, it will say that over 30 years, you will pay X amount of money for this property. So on a, and I'm just going to throw an example. I have no idea how accurate it is, but it's similar to this. You know, if you're borrowing $200,000 over the term of 30 years, you are paying $470,000 for this property, right? And it's always a little daunting to see that. And how can you do that in a way that you don't pay that much? Because if you don't, you get to keep it, right? But can you make that monthly payment so that you get to keep more? So that's where I was going with that question to you. It's your money, and this is a big move for you. So how much money do you need to use? What's the cost if you don't use all of it? Because there are going to be some things that you'll pay if you don't have a 20% down payment. What's the cost if you wait? And then what's the crystal ball look like with interest rates? But one of the most important things that I want to talk to you about before we get into that is there are thousands of different lenders out there. Okay, there are 4,000 real estate agents in Delaware. So I'm going to think that maybe some of us are different than others. right? In our knowledge of things, in our diligence and our care for our clients. I'm not speaking ill of the profession. I think I'm stating a fact that if there's 4,000 of anyone doing anything, if there are 4,000 plumbers, there are going to be different levels of ability. And so it's the same with loan officers and lending programs. And getting what I call Acme Mortgage Company to give you a great rate that you can say, hey, I got this rate. And then they can't show up at settlement with the money. They didn't get you such a good rate. So you need to go with a lender that is an expert in their field, that has the ability to explain everything to you, to talk to you about your money, where your money's going and what it's going to do for you, and show up at settlement with the loan. Okay? Please don't be tempted by the latest, greatest, whatever out there without discussing that with Amanda. Okay? Not saying that we won't give everybody a fair look and a fair shot if it's to your benefit. But I've just experienced it way too much where somebody says, no, I've got this covered. Don't worry about it. I don't want to share that information. Don't worry. It's this great mortgage company. It won't be a problem. And then there was either a problem with funds being delivered at settlement or improper disclosure of what funds were needed. In other words, they hid certain costs in different places, and it was a surprise at the settlement table. So this is something that we need to do together and work together towards. Getting pre-approved makes you the next best thing to a cash buyer. And look at it this way: if you were the seller and somebody said, hey, here's my offer, it's higher than anyone else's, and hey, don't worry about it, I'm good for the money. Or here's my offer, I know it maybe isn't as good as that other one, but here's my pre-approval, so you don't have to worry about that. I mean, if you're the seller, right, you're going to lean towards the sure thing versus the trust me. As a matter of fact, there isn't a seller out there that's going to go with the trust me. They're always going to say, well, before I sign anything saying that I'll sell you my home, you need to show me that you can buy the home, right? So that's why this is important, and especially in a market like it is today, where you may have to move quickly on a home. It may be on the market only one day, and you may not have time to go out and really search for a mortgage after you found the home that you love. So bless you, because this is such an important part of what you're doing. Know the finance part before you even write an offer. Know what those mortgage payments are going to be. Make sure that fits within your comfort level of payment. Know what the total acquisition costs are. So again, this is another topic that we could go for hours and hours, and I'm going to try to compress it as best I can for you. But there are mortgage programs, one called USDA, where you can finance 100% of the purchase price. There's VA loans where you can finance 100% of the purchase price. There are FHA loans where you can finance 96.5% of the purchase price, plus you can get a gift from a qualified relative. You can get settlement help from the seller. You can get grant programs if they're available from government agencies. Newcastle County had a $5,000 grant that we helped many people take advantage of last year. That money's being replenished, and I believe is coming back out at the beginning of 2021. The Delaware State Housing Authority has different programs. They will give you a different interest rate depending on how much money you use that does have to be paid back as a second mortgage towards your down payment and closing costs. So when you take all of these things and combine them, plus there are conventional loans with 5% down. Okay, and so general rule of thumb, the more money you put down, the lower your interest rate could be. The higher your credit score, the lower your interest rate could be. But you can use these different mortgage programs and all of the other things that I just reeled off as possibilities to have funds to use towards your down payment and closing costs. And you can buy a home with as little as a few $1,000s. Now, in today's world, it's difficult to get the settlement help from the seller that would knock that all the way down that low. But it still happens. So that's really what I'm going to take back to the question of how long should it take to find a home? If you are truly able to buy right now, you have all your own funds, you don't need any settlement help, or you're not waiting on some other programs, then that's going to speed up the process. Because if you're now narrowing the homes that you're looking at and considering buying to only sellers that will give you settlement help, in other words, they're not going to sell for their asking price. And in today's world, most of them are. But if you find that home where they're not going to sell for their asking price, perhaps you can get some settlement help. Okay, so I don't want to set the wrong expectation. I don't want everybody thinking, okay, I can buy a house, that John guy told me I can buy a house, all I need is a couple $1,000. I'll be in by the end of February. I mean, could that happen? It could, if you found the right property with the seller that could do that. I certainly think that socking as much money away as you can is something that you should concentrate on doing. But I don't think that you need to wait until you have 20% to put down. Because what's the cost of that home going to be if it takes you 3 years or 4 years to do that? Have you then priced yourself out of a home that you could have purchased now? Okay, so that's the answer to that question is your answer. It's not my answer. And your answer can be derived by getting with Amanda, talking to a loan officer that's going to, at no obligation, show you what you can buy, what your maximum qualifications are, how your comfort level of payment fits what you can buy, so you can see the difference between those two. Because maybe you don't want to buy at your maximum, maybe you do. How much cash do you need to acquire that home? Which loan program is going to be best for you? And what does that cost you monthly to do? Okay. Questions about mortgage? Again, I'm being very general with this here tonight because everyone's financial situation is different. But I'm happy to answer questions about the financing contingency.
Also, guys, if any of you are interested in just finding out how or what your level of comfortability is for buying a home, you could, for complete free, we can set you up with a lender just to find out that information for you. It doesn't mean that you have to put in a commitment or say, oh, I'm ready to buy a house now, but even just to get an idea of, okay, this is where I stand, this is the level of payment I'm comfortable with, just so you can even get an idea to start saving for that, and have a better plan for when you are ready to buy a home.
Yeah, I can't stress how important that is. There are a number of factors, so I'm going to hit you with a few of them here. First of all, just know where you are right now, right? Know where you are financially right now. You may have a credit score that is just a few points off from getting you a different mortgage program or a lower interest rate. And so the only way to know that is to find out. And you can't, sorry, but you can't go on what are some Credit Karma. You can't go on Credit Karma and get the same score that a lender is going to look at. There are many different FICO scores. There are scores that credit card companies use, that automobile dealerships use, and then there are scores that mortgage lenders use. So, and they're all different number of FICO scores. So get them to do the tri-merge credit report, know where you are, so that you know if you have to improve your credit. Well, if you do, what's the best way to do that? And talk to the lender about that. Because if you were to ask people, well, what do I have to do to improve my credit? Well, I need to pay off my credit cards. Well, maybe you don't. maybe your ratio of debt that you have to available credit is fine according to the credit reporting agencies and the FICO scoring people. And if you spend that money to pay down that credit card, maybe you don't have enough money to buy a home now. But the right loan officer, again, that doesn't work for Acme Mortgage Company that I talked about before, right? Somebody that really is going to sit down and care about you and go over this, they will go over those things with you. Hey, I see that you have this amount of money saved. Just keep it there. Just add to it, because they don't want to see big withdrawals or big deposits without you having to document what they are. What about student loans? You know, the status of that could change going into next year. It changed within the last couple of years as far as there's a percentage of the accumulated student loan debt that needs to be used in calculating revolving debt. If they're in deferment, there are certain rules for that situation. And that's why you need the mortgage expert to sit down and talk to you about that.
I have a quick question. So if let's say, you know, I buy a home in Delaware next year, and then in a few years there's an opportunity in New Jersey, and I decide, oh, I'm going to take a job in New Jersey. Is there like a bad note on my record if I end up having to leave that first house before I've, I guess, hit, you know, like paid it off completely? Like, do you end up taking out a second mortgage? I think it goes on the question of, you know, it's not really 30 years that you're locked in if it's a 30-year mortgage. I just don't know how that works.
Right. Alex, that's a great question too. There are some agencies that are going to keep an eye on that, but I don't know that they're going to enforce it. And so this is what I mean by that. When you are using a government loan program, an FHA loan, for example, is insured by the government, and you're signing paper after paper that says that you'll move into this house. But nowhere on there does it say that you have to live in that house for 30 years and you can't move and advance in your career, right? So as long as you're paying them on time and you want to, and you, let's say you either can't sell the property because you don't have enough equity, or you don't want to sell the property because you may want to move back. So you're going to rent it out for a couple of years. Or maybe you're never planning on moving back, and that's the start of your rental portfolio and accumulating wealth. If you're making your mortgage payment, they're not coming and knocking on your door and saying, hey, you signed papers 3 years ago that said you're going to live here. You did your obligation. You moved in, you lived there, life changed, you moved on, you kept paying the mortgage, whether you were living there or renting it out. The one exception there might be the Delaware State Housing Authority and their second loan. They may reserve the right to call that loan because they may want to reuse that money. I have experienced having discussions with Delaware State Housing where they knew that a homeowner no longer lived in a property. Now, they did tell me that they were not going to accelerate that loan as long as that homeowner remained current with that obligation to them, paying back, I believe it was $6,000 or something like that they owed. So the only one that I would be careful of would be if you got a second loan from the Delaware State Housing Authority. But the rest of them, if life happens to you, then life can happen to you. As long as you're paying that mortgage, they're not knocking on your door.
That's helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else?
And guys, if you don't feel comfortable asking a question right now, you are absolutely able to email me if there's something specific to your situation or anything that you're just looking into that's more pertaining to something particular. You can always email me, text me, and if there's anything that I'm not sure of, I can always go back to John and he can help answer that for you.
So I hope that this wasn't quite as boring as you thought it was going to be. I hope I put a little bit of pizzazz into it. Seriously, it says that we're excited to work with you. I'm excited for you. One of the things that all true real estate professionals experience is the excitement of helping someone buy their first home. That never gets old. It really doesn't. It is such a cool experience. Happy for anybody that is even curious about doing something like this. You know, it's a big step in life, but it is something that will propel you. It'll add wealth. It'll add comfort and security to your life. And I think it is something that, obviously I'm going to say everyone should experience it, but I really do believe that. I do still believe in the power of home ownership and having something that is yours. So reach out to Amanda and ask her your specific questions. We'll get you specific answers.
And look out for an email from me as well. I'll be sending all of those different paperwork I talked about, and probably a little review section as well, just to get your feedback on what you guys thought of this, since you're my first trial of it. So I'm super excited. And also, I did do a random generator. It was Josephine. She just left, but she just won a raffle. So I really appreciate all of you guys supporting me in this and coming out to learn this information. Like I mentioned, I think it's something we should have been taught a long time ago. And whether you're ready to buy a house now, in a year, 3 years from now, literally, I'm always here to help for any questions, as small or big as they are. Just want to be here as a support for you guys as you make this big decision in your life.
Thanks, Amanda.
Thanks, Amanda.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thanks,
Great job,
John.
Amanda. Thanks for letting me do this.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Appreciate it,
Joanna,
guys.
for all your
Both
help.
of you. Thank you.
Good night.
Hey,
Bye,
guys.
everybody.